Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Stay in Touch Cloud PMS Configuration and User Training Series, Integrations, presented by Stay in Touch Implementation Consultant, James Lee. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at Stay in Touch. Today's presentation will cover integrations in Stay in Touch Cloud PMS. In this webinar, we will cover the following topics: external mappings, CRS Sync tools, key interfaces, control mappings, including POS mappings, external posting interfaces, and room number mapping, as well as credit card workstation configuration. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. James, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Erin. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today in regards to integrations. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Make sure the right one. There we go. Erin, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is in regards to CRS integrations and with external mappings. This also comes into play with CRM tools as well. But under integrations menu here, you do have an option here for external mappings. This is first going to display all the integrations that you have currently active that offer some kind of external mappings. So for example, I can go into my Synexus OTA here, and you can see I have some existing mapping already. I have credit card types mapped. I also have some market segments. This is the S&T value, so this is what's actually in Stay in Touch. The external value is what that CRS system is going to be sending to us. So for example, with market segments, I have it set up in Stay in Touch as transient. That is one of my markets. But under Synexus, they're going to be sending retail. So by setting this mapping, we're saying if Synexus sends a external value of retail for market, we're going to map that to transient and Stay in Touch. To add additional mappings, you can just click Add New here at the top. These are the different mapping types we offer for this particular integration. We have add-on codes, we have credit card types, market segments, source codes. With add-on codes, usually in Synexus, there's an external value for those enhancements, but here I could link it to one of my enhancements in the system, which are what we call add-ons. So for example, if they have a New York City sightseeing tour, and they have an external value of NYC tour, and I could save that mapping, and that way when a guest books that add-on via the web booking engine, it will send that information and the add-on will populate to the reservations. But other values that we can map are going to be market segments and source codes as well. For CRS Sync synchronization tools, we do offer the ability to send a sync of ARI up to your CRS integrations. So from here, I can go to integrations, and I can go to Central Reservation System here, and I can go into Synexus for an example here. Now, we do ask that you don't mess with any of the information that's in the API access configuration area, because these are the credentials that are set up to be specific for your property to work with that integration. If you do kind of mess with these areas here, you do run the risk of basically shutting down your CRS integration. So make sure you don't mess with anything in this area. But up here at the top, we do have some synchronization tools. If you did some massive rate updates and for whatever reason, not all the rates are showing in your CRS, and you just want to make sure you send those through, this will actually send all that information up to your booking engine. You can click multiple values here. So if I want to send everything for rate, inventory, restrictions, reservation, and groups, you could do so. Now you can only do 1 month at a time. So you'll notice if I have my start date on May 20th, when I select my end date, I can only go out to June 19th, but I can go ahead and choose to sync that information and it will sync it through. I'm going to do that right now. I can also then move on to the next month by going into June 20th and move on to the next 4 weeks and sync again, and I can go on and through that information. Now, when you do a sync with your CRS integrations, please note that if you try to sync again within the same date ranges, you will get an error message. There is a waiting period. You do have to wait 3 hours between doing data syncs for same dates. So you'll notice if I went back here and try to send May again, or try to send, maybe just a week in May, or we'll do actually the whole month, it's going to give me an error message letting me know that a previous resync is in process. A resync can only be ordered once in 180-minute time frame. So if you're doing it in the same date range, you're not going to be able to do it more than once within 3 hours. Now down here at the bottom, again, with these feature settings, we ask so you don't mess with anything here. But under reservation settings, we do have some default options here. A lot of hotels choose to have a default rate code of Fix Me. So what happens in this instance is if a reservation is delivered from your CRS with a rate code that does not exist in PMS, we have it set to go to a rate code called Fix Me. And that's going to be a red flag for your property. If you see a reservation coming over with a Fix Me rate code, you know that there's a mapping issue with the rate codes. The good thing about that is it's very easy to see what the issue is. On the reservation that has the Fix Me rate code, you can open up the notes on the booking, and on the notes, it will clearly say, this rate code does not exist, use default Fix Me, and it gives the rate code that it's sent. So you'll be able to see what CRS is sending over and then be able to fix the issue on your side. But you can also set default room types, default payment methods, as well as default booking origin for Synexus. Most hotels in the States are going to choose the amount before tax, but we do offer amount after tax if you're doing tax inclusive bookings. For key interfaces, not a lot to go over here. I just kind of want to show you where the encoder configuration lives and where you can add additional encoders if needed. But under integrations, we have our door lock interfaces, and we have our key encoders listed here. Right now, I have front desk left, and you give it a location code. The encoder ID is the external value in your key system. So sometimes systems put encoders as 1, 2, 3. Sometimes they put 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So it's just depending on how your key system has it set up. But if I click on one of these informations here, and description and location, doesn't really matter what you put in there, but the encoder ID is very important. You're using the code that is set up directly in your key system. Next thing we're going to talk about is our control mappings. Control, for those of you not aware, is actually a third-party software that we use at our hotels that basically facilitates the integrations with external systems like POS, call accounting, voicemail, in-room movie rentals, Wi-Fi access, all those different kind of integrations that a hotel can have. We use Control basically to act like a translator between those systems. But the first one I want to talk about is a POS. So if you have Micros or Aloha or some kind of POS system, but under integrations here, under our control area, you do have your charge codes. This is where you actually map your charge codes for the POS charges. When I click add new here, revenue centers are showing are set up here. This is where I can see what's considered restaurant, bar, and room dining. So maybe this is a restaurant charge code I'm mapping here. I would then choose my restaurant charge code that I want to map. And then under category name here, now this information you will need to get from your POS company, but usually they have things like sales category codes 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be things like food, beer, liquor, wine. Possibly a fifth one might be miscellaneous, but they will essentially give you those different charge codes, or sales categories, I should say. We have tax category codes, as well as service charges and discounts. So by selecting one here, I could then come down to my charge codes and map that to, I think I have an F&B tax code here. I'll just put this to state tax. And we do offer the option to do meal periods as well. So if you want to be able to track meal periods for room charges, you have that option here, and you can turn that on. Revenue centers, this is where you set up your revenue center codes. As a reminder, when POS charges do post to guest bills, the guest really doesn't see the detail of the charge code mapping. All they're going to see is in-room dining. They're going to see what's on the revenue center here. So if you had a restaurant charge that consisted of beer, liquor, wine. If the guest charges it to their guest room, you're not going to see that information on their bill. Well, you will see it, but the guest will not. The guest will just see restaurant. Room mappings come into play with mapping external values for extensions and other systems. If you notice in my system, I have a 0 preceding all my room numbers. So it's by 3-digit numbers. So you can see 0105. But there might be an issue where you have your key system does not have the 0. Your key system is actually using 1. Or maybe you don't want to have your restaurants to always have to remember to put a 0 in front of the room numbers. So by adding an external value here, so if I added 201 here, and my system is set up at 0201, but setting this up as 201 will allow the restaurant to be able to just input 201 and not have to put 0201 to find a room. Same goes with the key system. If the key system just has 201 and you don't have a 0201, you can put that value here. External extension, this is for PBX. So if you have a PBX system where you have to dial a 7 in front of the room number, this is where you would put that extension here. And then access level, we usually just give 0 for all allowed, but this would be if you wanted to put a restriction on a room number or extension of what numbers or what kind of phone calls they can call. Generic mappings, these are other additional mappings that we might have available. You're going to see all your room numbers show here with the extensions, but there are other things that we can map as well. Things like in-room movies, long distance calling for call accounting, interactive gaming, in-room safe, point of sale, mini bar options here. But this is essentially where we do all the mapping. Now, when we do the integrations and set these up for you, usually to stay in touch, we'll take care of getting all these charges mapping, but it's just kind of a good idea to know where all this lives. For example, if I wanted to look at my call accounting here, I have some external values, local, long distance, and then I can link it to a charge code here. You do want to make sure you have a default set up. That way, if something comes across and there you don't have it to a charge to map to, it will actually fall back to a default here. All right. We do have a data swap option. This shouldn't be used very often, but if your names or for whatever reason aren't updating on phones, maybe the interface was down for a bit, but it came back up, and you want to make sure we send a data swap to all your phone extensions so we can get the names showing on there. You can initiate that data swap here, and it will basically just send all your in-house guest information to your phone systems or any other values out there that need that information. And the last thing we're going to cover today is going to be your workstation configuration in regards to credit cards and how we assign credit card terminals to workstations. But first thing we're going to look at are the EMV terminals. These are for hotels that are using chip and pin devices for credit cards. This is exactly where we configure what we call lanes. So we work with Shift4 on these devices, and they label all the chip and pin EMV devices as lane numbers. So here I can see lane 1 is my front desk left, and lane 2 would be front desk right here. I don't have an active EMV configuration set up on mine, but you will have a secondary menu over here with some commands. There's a reset pin pad command that you would see there that you would be able to process to make sure that communication's there. It would actually reboot the chip and pin device, so you would see it reboot if the communication is there. Now with the EMV terminals configured, you can then go into your workstations configuration and assign EMV terminals to your workstations that are registered. So there is a Windows service that runs on PCs or an Apple service if you're running a Mac that will allow you to give a computer a workstation name. But from here, I could say, for example, look at James Lee's PC. I have my encoders here, so I can assign an encoder to them, and I have my EMV terminals, so I can identify what terminal this particular workstation would be connected to. All right. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to you, Aaron, for any questions, but that's all I have to share today.
All right, thank you, James. I'd now like to turn over the floor for questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So I don't see any questions right now. I'll give everyone a few seconds to enter those. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. So in this webinar, we covered external mappings, CRS Sync tools, key interfaces, COMTROL mappings, including POS mappings, external posting interfaces, and room number mapping, and finally, credit card workstation configuration. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at erin.fisher@stayintouch.com. Thanks again.